Today, for your daily environment, instead of reading the news, I'm going to read a book because this book has been on my mind. I've been talking about it lately, and I'm going to give a little bit of background first. So, in my conversation with Dune Ives, episode 143, I mentioned to her in passing, I talked about something. Here's a quote. I asked her if I could read a quote from a book, and it's a book called The Once and Future World by J.B. McKinnon. And here's the quote. In the North Atlantic, a school of cod stalls a tall ship in mid-ocean, meaning that there's so many fish that the ship isn't moving. Off Sydney, Australia, a ship's captain sails from noon until sunset through pods of sperm whales as far as the eye can see. Pacific pioneers complain that the salmon threaten to swamp their canoes. So many salmon in the water that they're jumping in the boat and swamping the canoe. So I had read this passage. This was quoted in the New York Times. And recently I found out J.B. McKinnon is the author. Or rather, I looked up the book. And actually, as an aside, it turns out he also, before writing The Once and Future World, wrote The 100-Mile Diet about eating all within 100 miles. I haven't read that yet. I don't keep to within 100 miles perfectly, but most of my food comes from nearby farms. That's a little aside. So The Once and Future World talks about how the world we live in today is, well, this chapter that I'm in right now, is that we're at something like 10% the life that we used to have. So when you think of nature out there, when we want to protect what we have is 90% down, roughly speaking, from what was there before humans started expanding all over the world. So here's the ebook, and I have, here I'm in page 71, 72. I'm going to read a few bits of it. And this chapter is a chapter called the 90%, or the 10%, 10% something. The 10%, a 10% world. At the turn of the new millennium, Peter Kahn, the psychologist, he's in Lisbon, the capital of Portugal, and an 18-year-old says, I heard that some time ago, when there was none of that pollution, the river, according to what I heard, was pretty. There were dolphins and all swimming in it. I think it would have been pretty to see. Anyone would like it. And he says, anyone would like it. The nature that we have around us is nothing like what used to be there. And I don't know if you can hear the sound of some petroleum burning fuel cars outside right now. It's a lot of industrial noises you might hear in the background of where I live because nature isn't what it used to be. Anyway, so here's some vignettes, and this book is full. This is the tip of the iceberg. There were lions in the south of France, for example, lions in Egypt, in Israel, and Palestine, lions for that matter, in a continuous belt all across southern Asia. The man who wrote, Herodotus wrote about the lions eating camels in Greece. And he talks about wolves in England and Japan running in packs through the streets of a rising Paris, elephants in China, brown bears in the hills of North Africa, California condors in Canadian skies 1,000 miles from the nearest condors of today. Listen to this part. Sailors report walruses in the mouth of the Thames River south of London and in the Gulf of Maine. Walruses. In the year 1377, a poet, what is now Germany, talks about, I guess, what was called the Great Wilderness, an unbroken forest that took 3 days to cross and was home to bison, wild boar, wild horses, wolves, bears, lynxes, and wolverines. He talks about the Hamburg Harbor, that there were fish, 20 of them, so huge, each one was as large as a barrel-chested human butcher. So human-size fish, 3,000 a year were pulled out of the Elbe River. So I was curious. So I looked up the Hamburg Harbor and I went to the Wikipedia page for Hamburg Port, and here it is. So here it's blown up. It's not the ocean. This is a river that had thousands of, you could just go fishing and pick up fish that were the size of humans out of the river, thousands per year. So that means hundreds, something like 10 a day. I'm not aware of human-sized fish in any river going through cities today. Not that I would know that much. Let's not forget about the sounds. In New Zealand, a ship's naturalist talks about the birds, the most melodious wild music I'd ever heard. 500 years before that, the music was wilder still. By the time Europeans made it to New Zealand, see, the Maori, it's not just the Europeans. The Maori who were there before, they had long ago driven the seabirds to offshore islands and wiped out half of New Zealand's bird species. Humans do this, of all cultures. This is why I want to change culture. Let's see. So La Jolla, the score I wanted to say was the sheer abundance of life recorded in documents ranging from naturalist journals to fisheries reports is an astonishment. In the North Atlantic, a school of cod stalls a tall ship in mid-ocean. Think of how big the sails were on these boats, how dense the fish would have to be in the water, that a boat in the mid-Atlantic, in the North Atlantic, would stop in mid-ocean. How many fish would that have to be? There are not that many fish. It's not even remotely close to that. Off Sydney, Australia, a ship's captain sails from noon until sunset through pods of sperm whales as far as the eye can see. Now it's a big deal to tour somewhere to get to see a whale at all, maybe. Whereas here, there's so many, they can't even miss them. In the American South, alligators dwell in every swamp, river, and lake. More than 200 species of bird and nearly 80 fish inhabit Manhattan. When the shad pulse up the Hudson River to spawn, they push a wave like a tidal bore in front of them. A wave like a tidal bore in front of them. That's how many fish there are. In the Pacific, pioneers complained to the authorities that splashing salmon threatened to swamp their canoes. This is animals journeys. What is it? Every landmass is crisscrossed by the migration routes of animals, and it's as breathtaking as witnessed in the Serengeti plains of Africa today. So what you now have to go across, people will fly to go see something in the steppes of Africa that used to be everywhere. It didn't used to be you had to go all around the world to see what we would now consider nature. We've pushed it all over the place. We've pushed it away from every place. The stories go on. John Steinbeck talked about the swordfish as great as numbers and played around us. In the Chesapeake Bay in the U.S. eastern seaboard, hunters could harvest 100,000 diamondback terrapins. So I didn't know what a terrapin was, so I had to look it up. So here's terrapins. It's a kind of turtle. And 100,000 per year for soup. Pearl oyster reefs as tall as 5-story buildings, 7 miles long. He also tells this vignette of when he was in Argentina, he saw a city disappear. That's what he puts it. That is, he saw a bird, and he was so taken by the bird with its beautiful tail, 2 tail feathers, that in that moment in Argentina, I had my perception of hidden things. The city's smog and high-rises seemed to fade, and what remained was the floodplains of the Silver River. So he started seeing the understory of Buenos Aires, the Buenos Aires that used to be there, the nature that used to be there. And I read that, and I thought to myself, what is it like where I am? And so I live in Manhattan. I look outside. I see only industrial. I see buildings. I think things that people have built. But I don't have to imagine that much because someone made this book, Manhatta, which reconstructed what this area used to look like before. And this is, to me, a stunningly beautiful place. I think of Manhattan as a relatively small island, but there were rivers. I mean, it was big enough to have rivers in it. And this is like beautiful and green. Here's another image from the south. I guess this is after people were there because it looks like there's some fires burning, so people are growing stuff. And then here's an image of now we've built it out more. I don't know if that's good or bad, but we've done it. Manhattan is bigger than it used to be. I think we filled it in with garbage. And now here's a picture of juxtaposing the left and right is, how it used to be and how it is. Now, I like humans, and I think that in nature, without humans to appreciate it, I think we are where value comes from. And so I don't want to have no people. I want people. Now, this is a bit overgrown to me. I think there's far too few trees here for my taste. I think it would be healthier with more trees. So I looked up, this is Manhattan. I looked up Manhattan in 1919, 100 years ago. Here's a picture. So a lot more boats. And there's certainly a lot of smog here. I mean, I think they're burning a lot more coal closer to home. So I think the smog that we now produce far away from New York and bring in through electrical wires was all there. And I'm sure there's a lot of mercury coming out, but probably not dioxin and some of the other things. But look at this. There's like a beach maybe here. Actually, there's a beach in the other picture here because it was saltwater sometimes. And it's obviously not nearly as built up as today. And if we went back 100 years before, 200 years before, I'm sure there'd be a lot more trees. So between the left and the right, maybe something in the middle, I believe that we've gone a bit too far. That's a matter of taste. There's no proof. There's no mathematical thing here or science thing. It's just, it seems to me we have more people, more overgrown, less nature, less untouched nature than I think is the right amount. And I think of, what if we keep going the way we're going? And here, this is going to be, the future is difficult to predict. But here's a picture. I don't know if you saw Blade Runner 2049. And this is a possible dystopic future. We could end up here. Well, there's a really cool car. That looks really cool design. We like that. But you can barely see anything. There's no life here except one person. And then what can you see it's like totally smogged over. Here's, I think, a scene in the Las Vegas part. For some reason, Las Vegas seems a place where people can't go. So there seems to be some sort of lethal accident that made people not be able to go there. And this is what the city would look like. And this is, I imagine, something possible for us to create. I don't think I would like to live in a place like this. Maybe you would, but I think also the perspective of the book says that this is our world today would look to people from the past like this looks to us. I mean, not totally, but almost lifeless in comparison. I'm a big fan of solar power, but not not where we have to rely on it. And it's just like solar power. Here's another solar power collecting tower, another tower, another tower, another tower. I like solar, but I don't want to have to rely on it like so totally that we don't have, farms and things like that and nature. But if we get rid of nature, the more we get rid of nature, the more we need just, solar farm after solar farm after solar farm. If we don't have fewer people. Yeah, I said it. Fewer people. We had Earth Overshoot Day last month. I did an episode on it, and this is what we get. This is what our world looks like. I think this kind of looks like Hong Kong to me. I guess it would be China, Japan. I don't know, someplace. I mean, this is fictional, but it's kind of like what we have. And I think about today. So people are like, "Oh, I want to get away from stuff like that. I want to go visit nature." And so here's a scene of a typical place where people have vacations. It looks like a big, thrilling thing. But is this really what we want? So, and then another thing, this is Cafe Amazon. This is what a lot of people would associate with the Amazon these days. So this is not on the Amazon. This is, I understand, in Thailand. There's a place called Cafe Amazon. And this to me is this is a horrible representation to me, in my opinion. Others may feel differently, of what the Amazon has come to mean. And if we keep flying farther and farther up the Amazon to find the most remote places that are untouched, and there are no places that are untouched anymore, we will see cafes on the Amazon River. Here's what they serve at the Amazon Cafe. To me, I don't know about you, this to me it's disgusting to me. This plastic stuff, it looks like there's no fruit in any of these things. This looks totally unnatural to me. So you say, Josh, well, what do we do about nature? If we want to explore nature, what do we do? I mean, first of all, I hope that we can move closer to something like this. I'm not saying we have to go all the way there. It's a false dichotomy to say that if we lower the population, if we don't build up everywhere we possibly can, that we're going back to the Stone Age. That's not what I'm saying at all. Here's something that I do because I like nature in my life. So this is my windowsill. And this is on my left, my rosemary plant. And not every day, but usually I kind of brush it with my hands and the smell comes off and it smells incredible. I love the smell of this. And sometimes I cook with it. And I water it every day. Next to it is in the front we have some basil. And in the same pot, there's a couple oregano plants. And every now and then I clip a little bit and put them in my food. Sometimes I smell them. Sometimes I just nibble a flower. Here's a mint plant. And as we move over, here's that same mint plant again. Here's another mint plant. This one is much stronger. Oh, so much flavor. Here's another oregano plant. And these salad greens over here, these greens that I put in my salad sometime, so much flavor, so strong that sometimes you can barely keep them in your mouth. It tastes like a mix of horseradish and mustard. And they're super strong, super delicious. Here's some tomatoes that are growing. I planted a tomato plant. I think there's a bigger picture here. Here's a tomato plant. And these are actually not much bigger, but bigger now. And soon I'll be able to eat them. And I don't know what people get out of something like this. I think it's great. I just think I like this more. Maybe it's because I'm older. So there's the full plant. We have here the fig tree. So I haven't grown any figs yet. Actually, right here, there's some little nubs that are now growing into full-fledged leaves and some other ones growing more too. And these flowers over here, oh, these plants are so delicious. And I'm just getting more in touch with nature. I'm growing these plants. People probably know that I haven't flown. I'm in my 4th year of not flying. And I'm not getting less nature because it's there. This is not abusing it. This is actually growing and nourishing. Anyway, I wanted to talk about what I was getting from this book. I recommend it. I'm only about 70 pages through The Once and Future World by J.B. McKinnon, and just realizing what we think of as nature is maybe 10% of what was there before we reached the population levels that we have today. And to lower the population just simply means having fewer kids. And we can appreciate our kids and we can love our kids just as much if there's fewer of them. Yeah, that's something that has to be part of the conversation. But I recommend reading this book. I'll probably write more about it as I get more through it. But that's your daily environment for today.